A 14-year-old girl finds herself living between two worlds. One is a life of discipline, achievement, and immense pressure, built by the woman who adopted her. The other is a life of relaxed freedom, offered by the uncle who believes she should have been his. For years, she has navigated this delicate balance. But one weekend, a single conversation would force her to declare her allegiance, and in doing so, shatter the fragile peace that held her two families together. Her story begins with a loss. When she was very young, her mother passed away after a long illness. But her mother was a planner. Before she died, she made arrangements for her daughter to be raised by her best friend, a woman named Katie. It was her final wish. However, her uncle, Nick, saw things differently. He believed family should be with family, and he fought a difficult battle for custody. In the end, the court honored her mother's wishes. Katie officially adopted the girl, becoming her legal mother in every sense of the word. But Katie never wanted to sever the connection to her daughter's biological roots. So, a compromise was reached, an informal agreement. One weekend every month, the girl would go to stay with Uncle Nick and his family. It wasn't court-ordered, it was an act of goodwill, a bridge between two very different families. And as the years went by, the differences between them only grew more stark. Katie and her husband were both doctors. Their home was one of structure, ambition, and high expectations. The girl had been in private school her entire life, an institution so academically advanced that its curriculum was 1 or 2 years ahead of even the best local public schools. Her life was a meticulously organized schedule of achievement. There was competitive cheerleading through her school, a demanding sport requiring strength and precision. There was competitive dance at a private studio, where she honed her art for hours each week. Until recently, she also played the clarinet, only quitting to dedicate more time to cheer. Her school had a strict rule. To participate in any extracurricular activities, a student had to maintain a 3.0 grade point average. Failure wasn't just an academic issue, it meant losing the activities that defined her life. Even her allowance was a lesson in responsibility. She had to work for it, and at the end of the month, Katie would match whatever she earned. Life at Uncle Nick's house was a world away. Nick was a police officer and his wife was a preschool teacher. They homeschooled their 3 children, who were 10, 14, and 16. The decision was rooted more in their personal and political beliefs than in a pursuit of academic excellence. Their children's days were far less structured. Schoolwork typically took only 2 or 3 hours. Their extracurriculars consisted of church youth group and youth choir. There were no competitions to prepare for, no GPAs to maintain. When they wanted money, their parents simply gave it to them. Now, you might be thinking one of these lifestyles sounds better than the other, but for the teenager at the center of it all, it was just life. Until the visits with her uncle started to feel less like a family connection and more like a recurring judgment. Last weekend, she was at Nick's house, and the familiar pattern began. It was his usual routine, a slow drip of criticism aimed at Katie and her parenting style. He would talk about how his niece never had any free time, how she was always buried in homework or being shuttled between dance and cheer practice or work. He painted her life as a joyless grind. He would then hold up his own children as the ideal. They, he claimed, actually got to be kids. They were free from the pressures of competition and grades. He leaned in, his voice filled with a kind of pitying concern. He said something like, "Wouldn't it be nice to slow down? To just get to be a kid, like my kids do." And in that moment, something inside the 14-year-old snapped. Years of unspoken frustration, of listening to the man who tried to take her away from her home subtly tear that home down, finally boiled over. She looked at her uncle and her voice was steady. She told him she liked her life exactly the way it was. Then, she went further. "I wouldn't want to be like your kids," she said. The words hung in the air, sharp and sudden. And she wasn't finished. She told him that next year, she was on track to start dual enrollment, taking actual college classes while still in high school. She then turned her focus to her cousins, the children her uncle held up as the standard of a happy childhood. She questioned whether they would even be able to go to college. Her 10-year-old cousin, she pointed out, still struggled to multiply single-digit numbers. Her 14-year-old cousin, technically a grade ahead of her in the homeschool curriculum, couldn't solve a simple linear equation, a concept she had mastered years ago. She didn't stop at their academics. She brought up their hobbies, or rather, their lack of them. Every time she came over, the routine was the same. They would wander aimlessly around the mall, never buying anything, just looking. Then they would go back to the house to watch movies and eat fast food. That was their freedom. That was their childhood. The silence that followed was heavy and cold. Her uncle's face, which had been filled with smug concern just moments before, was now a mask of fury. He wasn't interested in a debate about educational philosophies. He heard only one thing: an attack. He exploded, telling her she had no right to criticize his parenting or insult his children. He pulled out his phone, his hands shaking with anger. He called Katie. He told her to come pick up her daughter, right now. He called the girl a spoiled, entitled brat, who thought she was better than everyone. The drive home with Katie was quiet and tense. When they finally talked, Katie's reaction wasn't what she expected. She wasn't angry at Nick. She was disappointed in her daughter. Katie told her that she had gone too far, that the right thing to do would have been to just smile and nod, to let his comments slide as she had always done. It was an unfair situation, but her response, Katie felt, was unnecessarily cruel to her cousins. Together, they made a decision. It would be best if she didn't go to her uncle's house for a while. The monthly visits were suspended indefinitely. But even with the break, a sense of guilt began to creep in. Her uncle's words had hurt, but her own words had been weapons. She had, in essence, called her cousins stupid. And they were just kids, living the only life they'd ever known, a life chosen for them by their parents. She had defended her world, but she wondered if, in the process, she had become the very thing her uncle accused her of being. It's a difficult position for anyone, let alone a teenager. On one hand, she was repeatedly subjected to criticism from an adult who fundamentally disagreed with how she was being raised. Her outburst was a defense not just of herself, but of her adoptive mother and the life they had built. She used the truth as she saw it, laying bare the consequences of her uncle's chosen path. On the other hand, her targets were her cousins, children who had no say in their own education or upbringing. Was it fair to punish them for their parents' choices? Katie's advice to smile and nod might feel unsatisfying, but it points to a complicated question about choosing your battles and protecting those who are caught in the crossfire. But we want to know what you think. When you're backed into a corner, is it fair to fight back with the harshest truths you have? Or is there a line that should never be crossed, especially when it involves family? Let us know in the comments below.